Hey, I'm Craig. Welcome to Let the Light In. Today we are reviewing the 7Artisans 27mm f2.8 autofocus lens. It's on the camera right now, and to keep in mind throughout the video, this lens will cost you $129. So what are some details about the lens? This is an apsc lens, 27mm, which means on a full frame camera, it's gonna act more like a 40mm type lens, and its aperture range goes from f2.8 all the way to f16. As an STM stepping motor, it does support eye focus recognition. Its minimum focusing distance is about a foot, and it does come with a USB-C port for future firmware updates. Now, let's dive into the details. This lens is very compact. It's not a pancake style to the extreme, but it certainly is small, which means traveling with it, having it on your camera body is going to be a hassle-free experience. It's nice and light and small. And because of its small size, the only physical control that you will find on the lens is the focus ring. Now, for a $130 lens, the focus ring is actually incredibly well built. It feels truly like a premium experience in its rotation, in its damping. It's very, very nice to operate. And in fact, because of the simplicity of this lens and its compact size, it's very well built. It's nice to look at, it's nice to handle. It doesn't support or sport any weather sealing, but overall, it's a nice lens to handle. When it comes to its autofocus, I never had trouble with the autofocus out shooting landscapes out in real world uses, and putting it to the test, testing its facial recognition features, the tracking on this lens performed very well. It tracked my face with both good speed and precision, quickly regaining focus if I ever popped out of frame and popped back in. So autofocus was very well done. Focus breathing, as you can see, is present on this lens, and you can see and feel the contents of the image both shifting, growing and shrinking as our focus shifts from the foreground to the background. Chromatic aberrations, how does this lens perform when it comes to that? You can see in this here, how on earth is a $130 lens so clean? It performed incredibly well with chromatic aberrations. So a very clean end result image, and autofocus is also reliable. So two very strong points already for this lens. Now, with flaring, this is where we start getting into the negatives of the lens. Wide open at f2.8, you will see it is going to have a very large washed out halo that is being produced. Closing down to f16 is going to, of course, greatly reduce those flares and streaking patterns. And if we go to kind of a happy medium at f6, you'll simply be dealing with light streaks from the light source. Now, lighting conditions, what you are, shooting, if you're shooting outdoors specifically, varying lighting conditions can really impact the performance of this lens. When ample amount of sunlight is available, then your colors are going to be very vibrant and maybe even in your mind potentially oversaturated. Then at other times, video looked to be almost slightly faded and kind of washed out. So in different lighting scenarios, the lens can really keep a consistent color look as well as kind of clarity in its result in its videos. And to show you kind of what I'm talking about, I'm going to compare it to the Yongnuo YN11mm lens. I'm going to be posting a review hopefully soon on my channel. I'm just about done with that. But comparing it to the Yongnuo 11mm, in both slightly overcast and brightly sunny conditions, the YN11mm lens is consistent in producing non-washed out or overly saturated colors. It had a very consistent kind of color profile, we'll call it. It was able to handle the various amounts of lights found within different scenarios, and it didn't tend to be washed out or oversaturated like we're seeing in this 7Artisans 27mm. It was able to balance the highlights and the shadows and figure out that happy medium. Whereas the 7Artisans 27mm, on the other hand, that we're reviewing today, it looks washed out, or it wasn't able to, grab the colors in the darker areas. It just struggled more with lighting being non-consistent across the spectrum of the image. So the Yongnuo 11mm is twice the price of the 7Artisans 27. It's $300. But with both lenses, we're still looking at relatively the bottom of the price scale, right? So the Yongnuo outperformed the 7Artisans 27 in that regard, and I hope you kind of understand what I'm saying when it comes to the colors and kind of being washed out and not being able to balance the variety of light found within the landscape. Now let's talk about stability. This is not going to be an issue for all potential buyers of this lens. Stability might be an issue you experience with this lens if your camera does not have IBIS, which stands for in-body image stabilization. So if your camera does not have IBIS, prepare to use a tripod. I put my Sony A7IV, in fact, all of the footage that I shot with the 7Artisans 27mm, I was using IBIS on active mode, which, if you're not familiar or you don't have a Sony camera yourself, active is the strongest amount of IBIS that you can activate on at least the Sony A7IV platform. And even with active IBIS enabled, it was still a decent challenge to get nice smooth footage. Now, fortunately, adding stabilization in post in DaVinci Resolve really was able to completely make that footage nice and steady and usable. But if you don't have IBIS, definitely you will need to have a tripod around. Now let's wrap this thing up. For $130, this really actually isn't a bad lens at all. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I was very disappointed in the way that it was inconsistently able to handle various amounts of light outdoors in that kind of situation. But I will say, when we bring it into a more controlled environment like we have right now, just some nice consistent soft lighting, it looks perfectly fine and normal. So what kind of environments are you going to be using this lens in? Take that into consideration. So overall, the major things, if you're going to purchase this lens, the major things you're going to have to look out for when shooting video with this lens are lens flares from lighting sources, lens flares and streaks, as well as if you have large reflective surfaces like a body of water, right? We were shooting in a river today. So like a body of water, large reflective surfaces, be aware that kind of the sheen and the reflection of the light is going to very potentially cause your image or your video to have a washed out feel to it. So be aware of that. Now, the positive of this lens is that it does have great autofocus. It produces clean images. You're not going to be dealing with chromatic aberrations. This lens does do a great job. Just be aware of the lighting and the colors that you're dealing with. All right, that is it for the 7Artisans 27mm f2.8 autofocus lens. Not too bad for $130. If you're looking to purchase it, the links can be found below. If not, then I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and remember to let the light in.